Yep.
And that's just not enough for medical schools to take the chance that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Application Renovation Season 4, Episode 10. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I am wonderful. I'm excited to chat with you and take a look at your application and see where some improvements can potentially be made to hopefully get you into medical school. How's that sound?
That sounds like the plan. So great. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, that's the plan. Let's talk nuts and bolts. How many application cycles have you been through? How many interviews have you had? What does that look like so far?
Yeah, so I've applied once to about 25 schools. I've received no interviews.
Okay.
It's the first week of March, so writing on the wall. I think I know where this is headed.
Yes, the graffiti in permanent marker, whatever is there to say, yeah, probably not this time.
Yeah.
Looking back at your application, where do you think you potentially may have gone wrong?
Yeah, so I think I knew ahead of time, but maybe didn't understand the severity of not having clinical experience.
Okay.
I also think I shared, I worked with a different application advising group. And when I reread my application, I included a lot of experiences from when I was much younger that I'm not sure that I would have used to really tell who I am today.
Interesting. I don't think I knew that this application comes from
Yes.
working with a different company. Just for full transparency, right? Myself, I co-founded Mapped and have advisors who you're actually working with for your next application cycle, which is not why you're here, but it'll be very interesting to compare and contrast this application cycle that we're going to look at now and what you will get after working with our team and kind of our philosophies on how to put together an application. So, but as you mentioned, huge lack of clinical experience that we'll get to, that I think is probably the biggest nail in the coffin. And then just lots of other things that I think we can learn from and help other people learn from as well. So, ready to dive in?
Yep.
All right.
Let's do it.
So the first thing I love to look at is when you actually applied to medical school. You applied pretty early, June 10th. So you apparently understood how important it was to apply early. So that's wonderful. We get through demographics. All of it is redacted out, which is good. Big red flag section, no red flags, which is wonderful. And we get to transcripts. We see some Villanova, Carnegie Mellon. So nice school choice there. Smarty pants. And then Southern California for Postbac. So we get to grades and GPA. And we see solid grades. What did you originally go to school for?
I was originally an economics major.
Economics. Okay. And decided didn't want to go teach economics at a school. What do economics majors do when they come out? I don't know.
I kind of think of it as they're like you focus more on problem solving than really very few people actually go on to be economists.
Yeah.
It was, I was undecided for a while, and a lot of it had to do with, I put myself through school. Yep. I worked 25 hours a week and was a 2-sport athlete. And so a lot of it, quite honestly, had to do with what was interesting enough, challenging enough, and I could do and get out on the other side.
Perfect. Very logical. I love it. So obviously at some point you're like, I need to go to medical school. I want to go to medical school. And so you did a postbac and you crushed that. Obviously you're a good student to start with and you continued to be a good student, which is wonderful. So grades are not your issue. We get to MCAT score. One and done with an MCAT score, 514. Fantastic. Great job. Love it.
Thanks.
So right off the bat, stats are not your issue. Those will keep almost every door open for you. And then we get to your activities. And we already mentioned there's a lack of clinical experience, as in like no clinical experience in your application and no shadowing. So right off the bat, I'll just get that out of the way. That is probably the biggest reason why you didn't get into medical school. And it's not just because you had 0 hours for those things. It's because you lacked hours for those things, you couldn't reflect on the time spent doing those things to then write about in your personal statement, talk about in activity descriptions, talk about in an interview if you were invited for one. That's the biggest thing. So for everyone watching, when I say like no clinical experience, no shadowing, it's not like, oh, you have to go check those boxes. It's you have to go and get these experiences for yourself to understand what you're getting yourself into. And you have some personal experience that you've written about here. And typically that's not enough, right? Of like, oh, I was a patient, therefore I want to be a doctor, right? Mm-hmm. So let's get to the first activity here. And my assumption is we got a little sloppy. You have here this director of operations. And I love some of your activity descriptions are really great, very powerful for the type of job that you were doing. Very powerful way of writing the activity descriptions to focus on numbers. Numbers show impact. I love it. It's very kind of resume business type impact writing, but it works for the type of thing that you were doing, and so it's great. But you have here, in March, COVID-19 swept across the country, and my role looked very different. So COVID-19, March 2020, right? That's when all this started, 2 years ago now. You have listed in your dates for the activity description, January 2019 to January 2020, before COVID ended.
The date is wrong. And I just feel like so many people have looked at this application and no one picked up on that.
So that's why I'm good at my job, because I pick up on the weirdest things of like, wait a minute, like that doesn't make sense. So, all right. So we had a year stint. It looked good, but then the description was off. So for something like that, like obviously the people reviewing the applications understand that it's very pressure packed, that mistakes are going to happen. It's a pretty big mistake. It's not going to be a huge like, oh, I'm not going to accept you because you didn't review your application well enough to catch that mistake. Yeah. Right? One typo is not going to get you a rejection. Over and over and over again, having issues, whether it's typos or just big errors like that, that's going to be the bigger problem. Okay. So not a huge issue, just something that stuck out to me. And that was funny. It was the first one. I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on? But the writing itself, right? Team-oriented and achieved a 50% reduction in median customer response. Like that sort of impact is really impactful for me to understand who you are as a person. And especially, again, for this type of description, this type of position where you can show your impact. A little sales pitchy, most meaningful wise in terms of what you're doing and who you are and who it's made you be, but it's impactful. So not a lot to say about this one here. Okay. We move on. Medical clinical experience, feast volunteer. Again, not a ton to talk about here description-wise. The best part about the description for me was this last sentence. It brings me great joy to see the children's faces as I deliver wild and wacky-looking organic cauliflower and later receive a picture of them scarfing it down, right? Mm-hmm. That's the human connection that I love to see in descriptions. Yeah. It would have been great if you told a story of little Johnny or little Sally being the one receiving this and seeing their face and not just this general statement. Could be much more impactful in terms of your writing.
Yeah, so on this volunteer opportunity, since applying, I actually have become a co-facilitator of the groups. So I've taken on a bigger role where I actually lead people through 16-week like health education classes.
Awesome.
And so I have a lot more to talk about because I've had a greater opportunity to connect with people who are in our program.
That's great. That's great. So senior manager of physical distribution here. This next one, paid clinical experience. Again, lots of hours here. Again, the timing is a little bit weird. So January 2018 to basically January 2020. So 2 years of work, 6,000 hours is roughly 60 hours a week. And maybe as a senior manager, that's what you're doing.
Yes.
So lots of time. And again, lots of impact through these numbers. Oversaw a team of 8 managers, 30 supervisors, 350 individual contributors. So just that alone tells me you have to have some sort of organizational skills, leadership skills, communication skills, right? The kind of intangibles that I can get from just seeing numbers like that is huge. So for anyone watching, like if you're in a position of management like this or kind of a non-clinical thing and you can talk about these types of numbers, that's great. I love it. Warehouse project manager. So again, lots of hours. So you went from kind of position to position, doing lots of time doing things, project management stuff. Again, lots of numbers, great stuff here. Not medical clinical, again, community service, Luma here. The takeaway here was a little bit interesting. This last sentence, as a result, this experience taught me to consider more than just my own goals when pursuing change. And I wonder if this was kind of your moment of like, oh, maybe medicine is, or this, whatever I'm doing in life is not what I'm supposed to be doing. It was from 2013 though, and then now it's 2022. And so it obviously wasn't impactful to be the switch to medicine, but it was just interesting to see where you were going and what was going on. So it's just something that I picked up on to go, okay, what's going on there in your life to make that switch that may be a good talking point for an interview question, being brought into an interview to say, hey, like, what happened here and why'd you switch and what'd you switch to and blah, blah, blah. So economics department TA. So the description here, just very basic TA job description. I love pointing out the teaching, tutoring, TA job descriptions because most students go with the basic. Like as a TA, I organized this, and as a TA, I reviewed paperworks and quizzes and graded them and whatever, right? Very basic stuff. My style is just like, tell me the story of one of the students that was really struggling and you help them overcome, right? Help them figure it out.
Yeah. So that was the one I actually did have a question on. So there are a couple of times where I include work experience from when I was in school, and this was at the suggestion of previous advisors I worked with.
Yeah.
But when I reread my application, to me, it does help paint the understanding that I worked a lot during college, but I kind of question the importance of including those experiences in my next application. So
my general advice for non-traditional students specifically, and traditional students, if you have a lot of things to talk about, is you should be looking at the impactful things in your life that have made you who you are. And yes, some of them should be medical and clinical because you're saying you want to go to medical school, and so this is what should be there. So if you put this TA experience on here because, oh, it shows that you love being a teacher, and being a doctor involves teaching, right? That's typically the line of thinking that people have, and I think it's complete trash because then you're forcing this narrative of who you are based on who you think a doctor should be and based on your assumption that medical schools are only looking for people who have teaching experience because of being a doctor, you have to teach patients.
Right.
So if there was another activity in your past, whether it was being a TA or from seeing one of your secondary essays, being a nanny, right? If being a nanny was much more impactful to you as a person and connecting with the families that you took care of, like I would have rather see you be a nanny, right? It's during college. It's showing you're working during college. The working during college, again, the message there is what? Like, I had to work during college to show you that even though I had to work during college, I still crushed school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Being an athlete itself shows a lot of what you're doing already during college. So why add work on top of that? So again, all of that to say, my general advice, the philosophy of our team is like, don't force an agenda.
Yeah.
Simple
I think
as that.
like when I reapply, I don't plan on including those because they were like, quite honestly, why was I teaching and tutoring? Like, why did I do that stuff? It was one of the highest hourly wages of all on-campus jobs, and I had to get through. Like, I had to pay the bills, so you had to be selective.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And there are times where potentially you should put something in just to show what you were doing during a time period that it's like, well, you weren't in school, you weren't doing anything else. Like, what were you doing? Oh, well, I was working at Walmart and I didn't think I should put that in there because it's not a super impactful job.
Yeah.
I've had that conversation with people. I'm like, but it shows what you were doing for 18 months. You should probably put that in. And oh, by the way, you are a shift manager. That's huge. Why not put that in?
Right. Yeah.
So, if you don't feel like it's a big part of who you are, if you don't have much to say about it in terms of how you impacted it or how it impacted you, and it's just something you did, and you have something better to talk about, something different to talk about, it doesn't have to be something more recent to talk about. That's not the answer here. The fact that it's from a while ago doesn't matter. If it's just not impactful and you're just throwing it in there because it highlights a potential skill that you think you should highlight, then get rid of it.
Okay. Thanks.
And let's go off on a tangent here. And there are no rules when it comes to the EC section. So potentially you could have one experience that encompasses all of the work that you did in undergrad.
Got it.
So you could have experience name undergraduate work and say, as an undergrad, to make ends meet, to put a roof over my head and food on the table, I worked as a tutor, a nanny, a this, a that, and just say, you don't need to talk about each one individually, but just as a whole, what did that look like? How did you, again, impact and all of that stuff? So you could potentially get it all in there if you feel it's important enough to just, like, I know I'm going to put that I'm an athlete, but I think it's important that they understand that I was also doing these other things and it gives context to who I am, then sure, you could do that too. Lots of ways to skin the cat, so to speak. All right. So we get to intercollegiate athletics, so women's track and field, which is great. I love a little bit of the story of who you are here, right? Improving results by just over 2 inches. Scored my first team point during the last meet of my senior year with a personal best of 1.51 meters. So I love that, right? I celebrated the victory, et cetera, et cetera. Awesome. So good story there. Student employee athletic department. So again, here's college work. So here's where potentially you have student employee athletic department, tutor, student center information desk that you have on here, nanny potentially, all just wrapped up into one experience.
Yeah.
So lots of potential opportunities. So a lot of this it potentially looks like filler stuff of like, okay, great, you work at the front desk here, you did a front desk over there, you did this, you did that. I see that you worked a lot during college, whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Some of the advice I received before was like including this to explain why, like almost, and this is the truth of it, is I was just like too busy keeping myself afloat during school to really like sit down and be really thoughtful about what it was I really wanted to do, or to be able to, not work for time. And it just, now when I look back on it, I just go like, why am I talking about something I did when I was 21 years old? I'm much older than that now. And I've been I've grown as a person. I'm just a way different person than I was when I was frazzled paying the bills.
And let me tell you, like, that line of thinking right? And it's not an attack on this other company that helped you, but it's such a pervasive just thought out there that if you don't come out of the womb knowing that you want to be a doctor, you better explain it.
Yeah.
You were an athlete. You were focused on probably just having fun as an athlete in college.
Yeah.
Doing what you needed to do to just be a part of the team, and non-athletes don't really understand the life of an athlete, the camaraderie, the family that you build with your teammates is huge, and that's why you're there and what's driving you, and everything else is there to support you. Right? You're going to class because you have to be on the team. You're working all of those jobs so that you can have a house, a roof over your head, and food on the table to nourish your body for being an athlete. And so, like, how dare you not know you wanted to be a doctor when you were a freshman or sophomore? Like, what were you? You were wasting your life. Like, it's just a stupid line of thinking, in my opinion. Okay. So, more athletics here with your basketball, and very, very common line of thinking for sports, for athletes, is I was an athlete. To be an athlete, you have to be disciplined, hardworking, a good team player, all this stuff. And I know that medicine is all of those things too. So basically, I'm ready to be a doctor. Right? I don't think the activities section is your opportunity to pitch how everything prepared you to be a doctor. Right? Just tell me about being a teammate, and tell me about like a time you failed. Right? You went to an away game somewhere and you all were crushed and demolished, and you all were crying on the way home from the tournament. Whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Show who you are as a person.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
All right. And then we get to personal statement. And I have lots of highlights here because the theme of your personal statement was kind of over the top. a little over the top, okay? So if you were to summarize the theme of your personal statement, what would it be?
The theme?
Yeah.
It's about my steel-toed boots.
Yeah.
Which I wore.
Yeah. And what?
What do you mean?
There's one other theme there.
Oh, I don't know.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Yes.
Teamwork. So, just in general, I am not a fan of themes. They don't work. Way over the top. If I could have done like I didn't do like a search to count how many times you use specific words. It was probably over the top though. Okay. So I don't blame you for what you wrote about, because the lack of clinical experience, you didn't have much to write about in terms of a traditional, here's why I want to be a doctor type personal statement. Your personal statement was probably the best that you could do with what you were working with, which is I'm a hard worker, and all of the things that I've done in the past have prepared me, I think, to be a doctor, even though I really don't know what one does day in and day out, other than my personal experience being a patient. And so I'm just going to write about what I know.
Yeah.
Right. So can't blame you for what you wrote about. If I were to talk to you, or probably any of my team were to talk to you, if you would have come to us with this application, we would have told you not to apply to medical school. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your money. Yeah. You're just not ready. So you applied. Cost a little bit of money to go through the application process, unfortunately. But it is what it is. So you found out that you weren't ready because nobody wanted to interview you.
Yes.
Right? And that's okay. That's not a reflection of your ability to be a doctor, your ability to be an amazing physician. It's just saying, hey, like, you need some more experiences. Come back to us when you're ready. That's all. Okay? All right. So 8 years ago, hung up my high tops. I want to picture like Sam, who's that actor, the like country dude with the really deep voice. 8 years ago, I hung up my high tops for a pair of steel toe boots. Like chewing on a piece of wheat, putting his feet up. Like this could have been a Super Bowl commercial. Second sentence here. Right? I knew I wanted to develop my teamwork and problem-solving skills. Right off the bat, I'm like, BS. Nobody goes, what do I want to do with my life? I know. I want to develop my teamwork and problem-solving skills.
Yeah.
But again,
I'll push back on that a little, because I will say when it finally came time to like find a job and I had received the offer for the company I worked, like there was a lot of me being like, I have no clue what I want to do, but I want to make sure that I am going into an environment where these are the skills that I'm going to work on. I was like, pick skills and go after that instead of picking what you want to be right now, because I just didn't have time to think about that. But I understand the the BS call.
So typically I would say, and if that was your thought process, great. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Typically, students work in reverse, and they'll go, okay, here's the list of all the traits a doctor needs. They need teamwork skills. They need problem-solving skills. They need this skill and that skill and this skill. And so they'll go, okay, I need to highlight those things in my personal statement, and I'm going to talk about how I just am gung-ho about those kind of skills. Yeah. That's the most common reason why students put that kind of junk in a personal statement. And so that's why I call it out as BS. But if you were like, I don't really know what I want, but I know that teamwork and problem solving skills are really important life skills to have, like, good on you. Like, that's awesome. All right. And then just for everyone watching, just the highlights that I made, right? Team development and boots and toes and heels and people and leather and feet and team and boots and like just over and over and over again. You're like, I don't have much to say, so I'm just going to keep circling around these things. Yeah. Some repeat information from your activity descriptions in terms of 900 people and 16,000 orders, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not a big fan of repeat information. Pulling from activities to personal statement. And so again, I just the highlights I have: steel toes and teams and skills and the experience that you had as a patient here, right? You talk about this patient experience with your endometriosis. The doctor created the interdisciplinary team, and you're like, oh, team, like I'm a team player. Like I was an athlete, I'm a team player, and what I do now, I have team, and so you're trying to draw these lines and connections just because you had nothing else to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. Which is it is what it is. And so just I really don't have much to say about your personal statement other than it just doesn't work, right? Because the goal of the personal statement in my mind is what has led you down this path to want to be a doctor? Like, why do you want to be a doctor? Yes. But what is the journey to get there? And so for you, as you're reworking your personal statement with our team, is okay, your endometriosis sounds like the words that we use is your seed, right? Yeah. You were on this path doing kind of wandering, building your teamwork and problem solving skills. You have a personal experience as a patient, and you go, oh, wait a minute, like there's this whole other world out there. Where, yes, a lot of the skills that I've built up over time can be transferable. I'm not really going to talk about that because it's not important, but this is really cool. Right? So that's kind of the angle that you go on, and then experiences that you've had since then that are confirming this desire to be a physician. So,
I have one question. Yeah. So I've watched a lot of the YouTube and read the books and stuff, like, I actually think, and I struggled a lot with this when I was applying the first time, that my kind of seed event came much earlier in my life. Ooh, okay. But then it was almost like life got in the way, and that my endometriosis might have been I think you call it like your pivot point of like,
yeah.
wait a second, I'm back. Like, hold on a second. I've kind of found my direction again.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. And that's perfectly fine. And that's great. The biggest failure here for your personal statement, which is a little kind of fun joke, but it's a huge fail in my mind. Read that last sentence and tell me what's wrong with it.
I don't.
So
know.
the time has come.
Besides it being really kitschy.
Well, it's super corny, right? But whatever. Yeah. To hang up my steel toes, and corny is what happens with themes, because students are kind of forced into this. Oh, I gotta finish up strong with my steel toe theme. To hang up my steel toes. Taking off a pair of shoes to put on a pair of clothes. Exactly. like that's exactly like. That doesn't work. Like, you don't take off shoes to put on clothes. I mean, sometimes you can put clothes over whatever, right? Yeah. Like, if you said to hang up my steel toes for a pair of like hospital clogs, like that would have made sense. Or to hang up my overalls to put on a pair of scrubs. I just thought it was super funny to end with something that didn't even make sense. But it's kind of the story of your personal statement, which again, like, I'm not blaming you. You didn't have much to work with. Again, if for anyone with a very similar non-traditional, this is why I wanted to have you on. Anyone with a very similar non-traditional story like yours, you've had amazing experience in the work world, right? Building skills and all of that stuff, like not taking any of that away from you. That doesn't equal I should apply to medical school, because those same skills are transferable to medicine, even though I don't have any experience in and around taking care of patients, any experience shadowing physicians to truly understand what it's like to be a doctor. You went into this very naive to what the world of medicine is outside of your stint as a patient and your ongoing world as a patient. Yep. And that's just not enough for medical schools to take the chance that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Even with your great grades, great MCAT score, great amazing skills and experiences that you are probably going to be a fantastic leader and classmate in the medical school class. You have to have that clinical experience. Again, not to check off a box, but to prove to yourself first and foremost that you're going to enjoy the medical world outside of being a patient, right? Nobody enjoys being a patient, but outside of just the exposure that you had from being a patient. So that's why I wanted to have you on and really tell your story as a huge warning to everyone else. Like, you can't make up for a lack of clinical experience and a lack of shadowing. You just can't.
Right. One of the things that I have struggled with, and, when I was looking and I reached out through the mapped advising, was an honest question of if what I have been able to scrape together, or like not scrape together makes it sound way worse. I've worked really hard to try and find clinical experience. Like, if it was enough to apply again. I feel like I've put myself in situations where I'm like, oh, this is what it's really like. And I'm still, definitely doubling down on this is my dream and this is what I want to do. But yeah, I just was like, I don't know if this, like, there was the big gap before. I think sometimes when you can be, like a bit overachievery, it's like, oh, I want to overcorrect, but I just don't have the time to be able to do that. I mean, I will apply again in, a matter of months.
Yeah.
So
what's your question?
I started really getting clinical experience in December of this year. And if that is enough time for people to say, oh yeah, she's the gap that she had before, she's now put herself in an experience where, she has made up for it.
Yeah. It's for me, it's not necessarily time. It's consistency.
Mhm.
And the fact that you have gotten it now,
Yeah.
and how are you able to reflect on what you're doing?
Mhm.
That's the biggest thing. Not just that you're
Okay.
getting it and you're checking off the box, but
Right.
reflecting and understanding how what you're doing now is impacting why you're doing this.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the biggest thing.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Any questions?
No, I think it's been really helpful, and I'd like even just being able to combine all of my undergraduate work into one experience. That's like a really helpful tip for this.
Okay.
The some of the questions I have are more related to like, does this count as clinical experience? Is it too much, too late kind of thing? But so yeah.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Advice for people out there who decide, like you did, to use a service to help with an application. I'm not blaming the prior service that you worked with that put this all together. Again, our philosophy, if you would have came to MAPT first, we would have told you not to apply. We would have just said, like, we're not going to work with you. Because that's just our philosophy. You weren't ready to apply to medical school. What were you looking for in a service to decide who to work with?
What was I deciding? Well, when I was looking previously, as someone who is non-traditional, many people reference using your pre-med like guidance counselor or going to your guidance, the things that undergrad institutions provide for students.
Yeah.
Even to make sure you're taking the right prerequisites or that your stats were right to apply and things like that.
Yep.
And I was so far removed that even when I would reach out to my undergraduate, like they didn't know who I was. It was a new advisor. They had no connection to me.
Yep.
And so I was looking for someone to help fill that gap. And I think I probably moved too quickly. And when I reflect back, there were a number of red flags. I'll share one of the things I really liked about MAPT is versus who I worked with before is it was kind of like an extracurricular for the people who were my advisors. It was like they had full-time jobs and then they did this as like 1 or 2 hours a week. They got 2 students to take through the process. And that made it really difficult to always trust that they had really read my essays. Like one of the people was amazing. And I know that she was like right there with me, but the person who was in charge of my strategy, it was like, wait a second, like, I'm not sure if you actually looked at all of this. And the other one was like, I know that there are a couple of times where I felt like we're trying to take what we got and make something out of it, toothpicks and marshmallows, but it's not quite like it's not landing and it's not actually my story.
Yeah.
And so I wish I would have listened then. And that was, has been very different of just like, well, no, if that's what your story is, that's what your story is.
Yeah.
That has been helpful.
Okay.
And I think the other main part is to be, aware of how engaged everyone in the process is in your outcome.
Yeah.
And I'll say that after a certain point, it felt like they'd collected my check and moved on. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you don't feel like that working with MAPT, and that's really good advice. And my goal for everyone, right? All of the free podcasts I put out, free YouTube videos, like I don't want anyone to have to work with a service. And there are always going to be people that want to, right? They just want a little bit of extra hand-holding. They have some unique circumstances they need to work through, whatever, right? So for everyone watching, like you don't need to come. I'm not asking you to email us or work with us, anything, right? Contrary, I almost never talk about the services that we offer here on the channel, but I thought it was interesting because you have this experience now with 2 separate companies and just the thought process behind what you were looking for that may help someone else with their thought process. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. You have some good experiences now. We're going to get that story nailed even better. We're going to get you into medical school. What does the future potentially look like for you? Do you have a specialty in mind for what that looks like?
Yeah, I think I want to focus in women's medicine.
Yeah.
I currently volunteer in an OB high risk clinic.
Okay.
And it's really interesting to be in OB versus in the gynecology clinic. They're very different environments.
Yeah.
Why clinical experience is so important. But so I still think that OBGYN may be my future, hopefully. Just not sure what part yet.